Solving proportions. What is a proportion? A proportion is a statement that two ratios of rates are equivalent. So let's just go ahead and look at two ratios of rates that are equivalent but not given their units. So we have 5/11 equals x over 44. So if we have a proportion like this, we can figure out how to get from 11 to 44 by multiplying or dividing. And I know that 11 times 4 makes 44. So I can use that same operation to the numerator. So I can multiply 5 times 4 and that equals 20. So x equals 20. Now, sometimes we have proportions where we cannot figure out how to multiply or divide to get to a new number. If we have that, then we need to simplify one of our fractions. So I'm going to divide the numerator and denominator both by 2, and I get 2/5. So here's my new proportion. 2/5 equals r over 15. Now I can figure out how to get from 5 to 15 by multiplying by 3. And I'm going to do that same operation to the numerator, 2 times 3. So 2 times 3 is 6, so r equals 6. Now let's go ahead and see what this would look like in a word problem. Marcy walked 24 dogs in 6 days. At this rate, how many dogs will she walk in 18 days? Well, let's first figure out what am I comparing? Dogs to days. So I'm going to go ahead and write that as my first fraction, dogs over days. Now, when I use this, I'm going to keep dogs in the numerator, days in the denominator. I have to be consistent. So it says 24 dogs in 6 days. Now, what is the question asking me to find? Well, it's asking me to find how many dogs. So dogs will be missing in my proportion, and I'm going to put 18 days on the bottom where days was. Days on the bottom, dogs on the top. Now I'm going to decide if I can figure out how to get from 6 to 18, and I do. I can multiply by 3. So I'm going to multiply 24 times 3. So 24 times 3 is 72. So Marcy can walk 72 dogs in 18 days. Now let's look at one where we have to simplify. Miss Wallace ordered 8 bottles of paint for 18 students. Use a ratio table to find the number of bottles of paint she would need to order for 27 students. Well, we're going to use a proportion instead of a ratio table. So here we go. What am I comparing? Bottles to students. Okay, so I'm going to write that as a fraction. Bottles to students. Now I'm putting bottles in the numerator because it comes first. In denominator, I'm putting students because it came second. Now I'm going to find that ratio in the problem, 8 bottles to 18 students. Bottles in the numerator, students in the denominator. Now what is the question asking me to find? Bottles. So bottles will be missing in my proportion, and 27 goes on the bottom or the denominator where students. 27 students, students in the denominator. Now I cannot get from 18 to 27 by a whole number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the numerator and denominator of this fraction both by 2 because that's the way I can simplify it. And I get 4/9. So here is my new proportion. 4/9 equals b over 27. I can solve that one because I know 9 times 3 makes 27. And 4 times 3 is 12. So Miss Wallace needs 12 bottles of paint for 27 students. Let's look at one more. How long will it take Casey to run a 300-meter race if he can run 120 meters in 24 seconds? This one's a little tricky because the rate comes second. So what am I comparing? Meters to seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and write that as a fraction, meters over seconds. Now let's write the rate, 120 meters over 24 seconds. Now what is the question asking me to find? How long? That's time. So really what's missing this time is the seconds. It says 300 meters. So since I put meters on the numerator, meters have to stay on the numerator over here. Now I do not know what I can multiply 120 by to get to 300. So I'm going to have to simplify. And this one's a little tricky to figure out what to simplify by. So this time what I'm going to do is find a unit rate. And that's to find the value of 1. So I'm going to figure out how far he can go in 1 second. To do that, I divide the numerator and the denominator both by 24. And 120 divided by 24 is 5. 24 divided by 24 is 1. So I found a unit rate. He can go 5 meters in 1 second. And this one's much more simple. 5 times 60 makes 300. So 1 times 60 is 60. So Casey can run a 300-meter race in 60 seconds. second one that could be a little tricky. Out of the 50 students in a gym class, 12 rate soccer as their favorite sport. Based on this result, predict how many of the 5,000 students in the community would rate soccer as their favorite sport. So, what am I comparing? I'm comparing the total amount of students in the gym class to the 12 students that chose soccer as their favorite sport. So I'm comparing soccer, that part, to the total students. So 12 students out of 50 chose soccer as their favorite sport. But what is the question really asking me to find? It's trying to figure out how many out of 5,000 would choose soccer as their favorite. So soccer as their favorite is what the part that we're looking for. 5,000 is the total in the community. So to solve this proportion, we multiply 50 times 100 to get to 5,000, and 12 times 100 is 1,200. So I predict 1,200 students in the community would choose soccer as their favorite sport. And this is solving questions using proportion.